our messages to each other, come to know
yes,
what we really need.
So Simon,
yes, that is a good idea. Last week, I suggest that we should have a WhatsApp group so that everything that you want to share, we can share it on WhatsApp.
Yes. So it is our principal to arrange it for us. He is the one to arrange it for us. And then communication will become simpler for all permaculture members in the whole world. I know he's listening us. He's now the one to make us understand and know that that is our count of what for communication and message delivery.
okay, so if we agree that we do a WhatsApp group, which we'll just use for discussing the themes of the course and sharing our particular situations, I think that's a good idea. It just takes somebody to organize that, doesn't it? So, and if we agree that WhatsApp is the best application to use, because there's many different ones out there, but WhatsApp is familiar. People were familiar with that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is somehow cheaper for most people. You know, there are some systems that are a bit expensive for other countries,
Yeah.
whereby they cannot be in a position to afford. At least with WhatsApp, everybody can be in a position too.
Okay. So we can work on that.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Because
yeah. Okay. Well, maybe Gerald can help me set that up. I'm not very used to WhatsApp, but I know it's not difficult.
Yeah, sure. And hi everyone. Sorry, I'm a bit late. Yeah, sure. That's a good suggestion. We will initiate that. I will take the lead on that. And as Steve said, as long as everyone is committed to keeping the conversation streamlined, yeah, and then also ensuring that everything shared on there is relevant to the purpose or to our PDC, then well and good. So I'll take the lead on that, and I'll see how to get the individual's numbers gradually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
back to you, Steve.
Yeah, that's one thing I've been just struggling with, or the challenge is to get a good dialogue, a two-way communication between everyone now. What I was saying is, you've heard me doing a lot of talking, and I want to hear back. It has to be much more two-way now. And in our final weeks, what are we at, 19 now? I think we've got 5 more weeks. So these next 4 weeks are going to be very important. And we've got a lot to learn, as in how we apply these to our situations. We're seeing the devastation. So you asked what we talked about last week, Simon, and I was responding to the fact that many people had been affected by the heavy rains and flooding, and we started talking about designing and building more resilient systems, and recognizing that we're going to be facing these challenges, and we can't just behave like we did in the past. We've got to start to have a vision of how to go, into the future. And yeah, so obviously landscape and water management is a big part of permaculture design, and really how we manage water is one of the very first things we think about, because we need to catch and store. How did you summarize it, Gerald? You said slow, spread, and sink, I think, or something like that, which is that's a really good thing. We need to slow the flow of water, spread it sideways, and let it to sink in the ground. And, if our swales aren't big enough, we have to make them bigger. The observation is how big do I make my swale? Well, look at it when you've got a lot of rain, and it'll tell you if you need to make it bigger. And these are the things that they take time. So the thing about permaculture is it's not an instant fix. You've got to apply yourself, you have to observe, and you have to keep tweaking and modifying, especially if the conditions are changing. And we have to build systems that don't get washed away. Of course, there'll be damage if there's in some places, if there's a strong weather event, but we need most of it to survive so that we can then rebuild. We have to bring this into our design thinking now. And in this week, I'm going to talk about agroforestry and food forests more, because we need a lot more trees in our productive systems. For sure, that's part of how we achieve a much greater resilience. So that's a little bit of what we were talking about last week. And we went back and looked at the bioregional organization chart. We touched on that, I think, in session 14. But I felt when we looked at that, I learned a lot from that. And I think it gives us a sense of strategic planning and priorities. And again, that's what we're going to have to, bring that into our thinking because of the challenges that we face, right? So we need to be strategic. So I'm thinking about Andre, when you're saying you're slowly recruiting people to your group, that's fantastic. Then you're going to think about how are we going to arrange those people, into teams, and to break down the many different tasks that we have to think about so that we can be focused and actually achieve things, on the ground, so that we're ready for the next rainfall, we're ready for the next growing season, we're building our support systems and learning and improving all the time. Because whatever it is that we're doing, we can always do it better. We can always be stronger. Okay, thank you, Caroline. So yeah, there we go. So Caroline's reporting how, that's exactly what happened to there, that the swales weren't quite big enough and strong enough, and they're going to have to repair. But you're going to have to think about how to make them a little bit stronger and a little bit bigger. And we can use plants for that, remember. And the anchoring of roots makes, obviously, the soils, reduces soil erosion, but it also increases infiltration for rainfall. So, and we obviously last week we saw some pictures of vetiver hedges that Tebendeki Ali has been constructing there at Butambala. And, there's many techniques that we can use. So let's choose which one we're going to use and start to deploy them now so that we're ready for the next extreme weather event. We've got, and then think about what we can build on top of that to make it even stronger, because that's where we're going to have to go. And we've got to lead the way for our communities as well. We've got to show working models that people can learn from. Caroline, would you like to tell us anything more about what you've been doing there in sorry, I didn't catch the name of the place. If you're able to chat, do just tell us a little bit more. Otherwise, we'll carry on. But
yes, Steve.
Yeah.
Yes, I could say a little bit more about that. Oh, yes, we have Caroline. And Carol, the vetiver that we planted there, will make it now, very soon. Okay, so yes, what you've just mentioned, I think to do with swales, and then other resilience techniques is the way to go. Actually, when I've just had a meeting with the people from MMS in Tororo, and they said that swale alone was sort of another resilience enforcement. Apparently, they've been having lots of flooding from uphill, but then they realized that alone, if properly done over time and replicated over the landscape, is going to be very vital, not only for the flooding, but even for groundwater recharge.
Yes.
Because as you slow, so it's basically slow, spread, and then sink. So all those are having multiple impact. As you're slowing it down, that means you're reducing the pressure, you're reducing the erosion. Spreading it means taking it to have it evenly spread across the landscape. And then sinking it further is not only is going to also play a role in doing both the groundwater recharge, but also sort of allowing you to harvest the water where it's most needed. As we always say, the best place to harvest your water is in the ground, because at the end of the day, it's going to form back into the cycle. I will show that image later on, but in the interest of time, please, I will say let's proceed.
Okay.
Unless Carol, is she on YouTube or something?
No, she's there. She's there, but she may be not able to speak. She sent a message. Oh, she's there.
I'm not. I'm available.
Yes, Carol. Oh.
Hello.
Okay, you sound like you're on a motorbike. Okay, she's gone again. Okay, so we got a lot of disturbance there. No problem. Okay,
She's traveling.
yeah, it sounded like a... Okay, hopefully you can see my screen, yeah. And here's the page for today so far. Diversity is key, lesson 19. Image which is from our teaching manual. Is showing a diverse food growing system. We're seeing canopy tree, an understory tree that's been coppiced, shrubs, ground cover plants. We've got a banana circle. We've got some water harvesting. We've got another kind of swale system looking like this. We've got climbers, a trellis, chickens. So all of this is to give us the idea of diverse system. And the theme for today is to use and value diversity. It's diversity that gives us the resilience, and it also increases the yield. And I'm going to take you to a very particular place today. So and this is called the Wakelands Agroforestry Research Farm. It's in Suffolk, which is in the very east of the United Kingdom, in England. And I'm going to challenge you to use your imagination, because I'm going to show you a temperate system, a cool, temperate climate system of farming. So that's how we do it in the UK. You have to translate it into a tropical system. Remember, the patterns are the same, but the details will be different. So that's very important. So if we're looking at the patterns in this picture, this is a tropical picture. So when I look at that, I can think, oh, well, I could substitute that tree with a timber tree that I'm familiar with, or a fuel tree that I'm familiar with here, or instead of bananas, I might grow apples. You have to supply the detail all the time. Permaculture is always showing you the patterns. On the PDC, we show you the patterns more than we build down to the detail. So I want you to hold that in mind, and this will be our lesson. Okay, so Does that work? Why isn't that? Oops. Oh, apps haven't. Oh, God. Yeah, sorry. Ooh. Oh, sorry. I've got a different computer set up this week. I'm going to just. There we go. Okay, so firstly, let's have a look at what it looks like. Okay, so this is the Wakelands Agroforestry Demonstration Farm in the county of Suffolk. And here is Professor Martin Wolf. This project, I think, was about 35 years of his life. So this is Martin's passed away now, sadly. He was still working at about 85 years old, and his wife, when I went for the tour there, she said, "I told you to start it earlier." But in our climate, in the temperate climate here, things happen more slowly. So it takes many years for these systems to develop, and then it takes many years to really gain the to get the results. But what they have done at Wakelands, and why this is so important, is they've done the scientific research and they have the evidence of how effective agroforestry systems are and can be. And he's standing there talking to you, telling you about vast potentials that you can tap into by understanding the knowledge of what this man has acquired in his life. So I want you to be inspired by this gentleman, because he, at about the age of 50, he realized that to really test his ideas, he had to buy a farm and design it and run it according to a different set of principles. And here he is. Imagine the satisfaction that you must feel 35 years later, and you're saying, I've proved the case for this approach to farming. So I'm going to try and explain. I didn't understand. This man had a lot of knowledge. He knew a lot about grasses, growing wheat and barley and things. Now this translates to growing maize. Don't forget, they're the same types of plants. It's just that you're in, so everything that you're going to see in this lecture is relevant to you also. You've just got to translate it slightly. So this man dedicated his 35 years of his life to developing this farm to show a more resilient form of farming, and it is based on diversity. So it's very relevant to be looking at this in the context of Principle 10, David Holmgren's Principle 10, use and value diversity. So guess which bit is his farm and which bit isn't. You can see very clearly that the Wakelands farm looks very different from the land surrounding it. So this is in the east of England, as I said. We call this East Anglia. It's very flat there, as you can see. And it's where most of the very intensive farming in the UK is done in this area. They have good silty soils, and the flat land lends itself for machinery, for industrial type farming with big machines. And one of the things that Professor Wolf noticed over time is that those farms that are using those big machines and using chemicals even they have these fantastic soils, they're breaking down and they're blowing away in the wind. in the summer, and the land is drying out. So the UK we have a cool, damp climate, but it's changing. It's changing because of climate change, but it's also changing because this kind of farming dries out the land. Now just look at all that bare soil. This is what happens when you do monoculture, because you're doing everything at the same time. So let's firstly, before we go to wetlands, let's contrast it. Let's look at the bit that's not wetlands. Let's look at this bare soil, and you can see the tracks of the tractors on it. Think about the compaction. Think about when the wind blows across this landscape, all that moisture that's lost, all that evaporation from that soil. Think now again about the sun shining down on that soil, and the heat from that sun is going to make the carbon in the soil, the humus, organic matter, that essential component for fertility, for the soil microbes, that is going to oxidize, and it's going to go off as carbon dioxide. So not only is this not very resilient and eroding, but it's actually contributing to climate change at the same time. Now, nature, let me remind you, and let's just really remind ourselves and fix this thought in our minds, is nature never does a monoculture, a monocrop, one species of plant for acres of land. It never happens. So when you do that, you create a big field of maize or a big field of any kind of crop. It's very vulnerable, because when you harvest, your soil is all bare at the same time. You know, if one pest comes along, it can multiply because you've created the ideal conditions for that pest to multiply. You're literally setting yourself up to fail. Now, with these big monoculture systems, they use a lot of chemicals to control all the factors. Instead of working with nature, what they're trying to do is they're using energy, and it's petrochemical energy, to control nature. You can see, if you look at all of these farms, you see the impact of vehicles, of tractors, mechanization. We see huge areas of one thing and so much bare soil. So all of your alarm bells should be going when you see something like this. This is not sustainable. And again, let's just look at these bare fields and say to ourselves, where are the birds going to nest? Where are the other species going to live? Where are the frog ponds? Where are the insects supposed to breed? Where are the predator species that might regulate potential pests? Where are they going to live? Where are they going to breed? There's no space for them. All we thought about is whatever the crop is, wheat probably, wheat. And I see it in Africa, maize. You're always going to create massive challenges for yourself when you do a monoculture system. So, okay, that's us looking out. Now let's just look in. Let's look at this area. This is the Wakelands Agroforestry Research Farm. It's surrounded by trees on every boundary, every perimeter. Why might they do that? Ask yourself, why did they do that? Are these trees productive? Are they part of the crop? Are they going to cut them down? Or are they just there for another purpose? I want you to use your powers of observation to look into this picture and ask yourself, what am I seeing? What is here? Let's look at this field here on the right-hand side. I can see strips of what look like trees and they're in straight lines. And in between, we've got very narrow, long fields. Well, now let's think about why that might be the case. Remember, this is very deliberate, that Professor Wolf spent 35 years developing this. So he put a lot of thought into it. So let's really honor and respect his work by looking at this image and asking ourselves, why are they like this? Why are they that way and not that way? Because there's a reason. Why are the fields so narrow? There's a reason. This is not an accident. Nothing here is an accident. Let's get this next field. We've got very different kinds of trees here. They're definitely different from here. We can't see exactly what they are, but let's ask ourselves the questions. Look, and again, it seems like we have cultivation in rows between these trees. But look, we see where we do see some bare soil, see how it's protected by the trees. See how there is some shadow, some shade, how those trees might also be circulating nutrients, circulating humidity, and protecting those soils. Okay, let's just take a pause and let me ask you a question. Look at this landscape. Imagine now if we have a torrential rainfall. Imagine now that we have, a weather event. Instead of normal rainfall, we get supercharged climate change rain. What's that going to do to this soil, to this landscape? Think how much more protected the fields are within the Wakelands Agroforestry Research Farm. Look how each field is contained by living plants. That's going to massively reduce the erosion risk. And also look that, yes, he's done some ploughing, and yes, they've got some bare soil, but only in small areas, not the whole farm all at the same time. They're taking such a risk, this surrounding farm, because they've exposed all their soils at the same time. So if they have a weather event just on one day, their whole farm could be destroyed for a generation. So this is a very high risk strategy. Now I'm going to ask you a question as well to think about this is, okay, this farm looks fine. It's got interesting things going on, but surely these intensive farms outside, the next door neighbors, ultimately they're going to produce more crop. So let's ask ourselves the question is, because Professor Wolf has done the research and he's published it, and he said he's made a contrast between the productivity of this field and of this field or this field. So that's so interesting. What is the impact of having all of these trees? The main reason we're doing farming is to produce a yield, to sell, to take to market. And so, okay, maybe Professor Wolf, he has more habitat for birds, for insects, for frogs, and whatever important life there might be. But I'm a farmer. I'm here to produce wheat and barley or maize. I'm not so interested in these other things. Now remember the theme for this week is use and value diversity. So Professor Wolf has taken that and he's applied that idea of diversity to his land. So think again, let's also think about, look, this looks like we've got some pasture here. So maybe he's got some grazing animals and he's got that nicely protected as well. So that's one kind of system. We're seeing another kind of system here, something slightly different here. If we look over here, I don't know what there is here, but these trees are much bigger, aren't they? Look how these are much taller, more established. This is almost like a woodland on this side. So he's really created a whole range of different conditions. So that's going to favor different kinds of birds, different kinds of insects. It's going to create different kinds of soil conditions. So we can explore that diversity and from it create a diversity of yields. Again, let's look at this section. This looks like just a woodland, very dense. And we've got some trees haven't quite got their leaves yet. This must have been early in the year, and some are coming into leaf. So again, another kind of diversity. You can see that he's not using one type of tree. We've got many types of tree. And now this is an agroforestry system. And what we mean by agroforestry is we're still doing agriculture. We're still growing things like wheat and barley and maize and potatoes, kind of crops that we associate with farming. But we've also got forest systems. And so we can explore and think about what the yields might be from those systems and how that might contribute to the overall farm system. So, okay, we've got some settlement here. There's obviously a house and some barns and some farm structures. And I can tell you that because this is an agroforestry research farm, obviously there is research going on there. So this farm has a relationship to universities, to people, students doing long-term studies, PhDs, or I don't know, all sorts of different things. And I was one of the many people who was invited to come and, to visit the farm and to learn and study from there. So also realize that's obviously a very important part of the yield. So in what you're developing where you are, part of your diversity of yields is the knowledge that you're learning and then your ability to share that and to teach other people. So there we go. There's our first overview of the farm. And as I say, just really take it in and see what we've got there and understand just how special and unique it is. And even without knowing any of the reasons, we can see that there is strategic placement of elements in patterns to fulfill functions. So this fits within the way that we think and plan in permaculture. He's trying to copy and emulate nature, but also to do it in a way that suits other functions, such as maybe using farm machinery or whatever other reasons that there might be. So there we go. There's our first overlook of it. Let's jump inside. There's the professor, and he's standing there in a field of wheat. And what he's saying there, we're going to go to one of his lectures later on in this session. So we're going to find out more about what he's talking about. And I'm going to say, some of this went over my head slightly because I don't have the specialism that he has, but he's clearly, there's deep thought, a deep consideration gone into this. So here's us, some of our group touring around, and now we are inside the farm. Let's just get a feel for how different this is from a lot of what we're used to seeing. Now this just looks like a pasture field. Maybe it's cut for hay, fodder for animals, especially here. In the tradition of farming in United Kingdom is when we're doing animal farming, is in the summer, we'll harvest some of the grasses and dry them and ferment them so that the animals have feed in the winter when nothing grows, it's too cold. So we call that hay and silage, and there are different techniques for storing grasses. And one of the design considerations that we were told when we came to this place was the width of the field relates to the width of the mower on the tractor that they use to cut it. So let's say if it's 5 meters wide, that the mower of the tractor, they've made the field, let's say 20 meters wide. So 4 passes and they've mowed it. So they've designed around the tools that they plan to use. There's a design consideration. They've thought about how they're going to manage it, and they've, again, just think, this is a 35-year project. So this guy there's a lot of thought gone into this, and you can build systems that look like this much quicker because you're in the tropics. And we don't know exactly what the species of tree are here. I could guess a few of them, but clearly they will have been selected carefully. But then let's just think about, so here's our pasture, and what we're seeing, those little white flowers, is clover. And clover is a fodder plant. Animals like to eat it, but it also fixes nitrogen. So he's got part of the long-term fertility storage is by having nitrogen fixing plants mixed in the ley, in the mixture of plants that we're growing for fodder for animals. Think about how much habitat there is in these trees. Birds, insects and beetles and worms and everything else. And then think about how those creatures in this hedge or in the forest strip are going to then also interact with all the plants in this meadow. Think about bees and so forth. Now, all of that contributes to the long-term fertility, long-term fertile cycles. And also, let's just think about if we were to have extreme weather event, that this is much more protected, and that's very much in the design thinking behind this as well. So I could say another thing is, if we just go back to our shot, is you'll notice that all the corridors of trees are in the same orientation, and I can tell you that they are from north to south. Why? Why would they be from north to south? Well, the clue is the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. In the tropics, the sun goes overhead much more, but in our climate, the sun's lower on the horizon. So those trees would create a huge shadow. If they ran east-west, there'd be a lot of shading, and we don't get enough sun, so we've got to design our farms to catch as much sun as possible. You might be designing your farm to create more shading. That's the difference. That's the detail. So the pattern here is we've arranged the trees in a way that either maximizes solar gain or minimizes solar gain. We're in the cool, temperate climate, so we want to maximize solar gain. So we've put our avenues of trees north-south, so that's the minimum amount of shading, of shadow on the annual crops. So again, design to fulfill a function with a long-term goal in mind. Because that's the thing, when you design in this way, it may take a little while for the system to establish, but once it's in place, it's now permanently in place. Okay, so here's our first one of our types of field. It's a pasture field. It looks like it's just on the edge of a forest. And that's another principle in permaculture we're very interested in, is maximizing edges, because we create unique sets of conditions along edges. Because look, along here we've got sort of the benefits of the grassland and of the forest. And there's going to be certain creatures and animals and insects that love to just hang out on this edge because they can sort of get the best of both worlds. So this is adding a layer of productivity because we're creating microclimates, microhabitats. So yes, we've given up some of the space of our farm We've given up some of the space that could be crops to trees, but we're going to get benefits from those trees that help the crops too. So there's an exchange. So again, let's go back to that question. Keep that in mind that I asked you is, how much wheat per acre do we get off this field compared to this field? Wouldn't that be interesting to know the difference, the comparison? So does this indeed have a positive impact? And if it does, by how much? That's the question that Professor Wolf asked himself, and he wanted to prove. And obviously these farmers here are thinking, I'm not interested in trees, I just want my maize, my wheat, my barley. And who's going to win? So let's carry on around the farm. We've seen here, this is growing a grass. This is a fodder grass to feed animals. This is I'm going to say it's wheat. It might be barley. It looks like barley. Anyway, wheat or barley, it doesn't matter. It's a grass. We grow it for the grain. And this is the backbone of agriculture in Europe. And well, across a very, very important crop around the world, really, is growing wheat and barley. Wheat, obviously, we make our bread from. Barley, we make beer from. And also feed to animals. But really, it's this is a very, very important food crop for us. And it's not so different from maize, really. It's the same type of family. But you'll notice, let's notice some things in here. So we've got the same kind of field. We can see some kind of tractor has driven through, and we can see that the width of the field fits the width of the tractor. So we can see that, and we can see the rows of the crops. But look, there are canes here, markers, and there's little white cards. So something's going on here more than just growing the crop. They're doing an experiment. They're monitoring what's going on. Remember, that's another yield, is the learning, the knowledge. And because things are changing, because of the climate change, because of things, so we're going to have to monitor, observe and interact. Let's try different approaches and techniques and see what we learn, okay? We're using and valuing diversity. And we're creating different conditions, and we're going to explore which ones of those work the best. All of this is super interesting. And I hope I can bring this all to life for you. So again, we're just seeing what's there on the farm. We're walking around. Smell the air. Hear the bird song. Notice the insects. Look at the soil. Look at the ground. Look at the plants. Are they all the same? Look, what I'm seeing is they're certainly not all the same height, are they? We've got short ones, we've got taller ones. We've got some flowers and things in there. We're certainly seeing some degrees of variation. And then we're also seeing, again, alleys of, again, different kinds of trees again. I wonder how he selected those trees, what choices he made, what research he did to choose what varieties to do. I'm going to ask you the same questions. If you're going to be inspired by the ideas, what trees might you want to use? Where would you go to source the seeds or the saplings to start your own experiments and projects? These are all things that Professor Wolf was thinking about. So, and we've got to learn lessons from him. He's not here anymore. He's passed away. So let's look at his legacy. Let's learn from that and